It's James.
And Stephanie.
And welcome to San Diego. We have just got back from our week of test camping in Winnebago's eRV2. It's an all-electric prototype RV.
Yes, we are here at Sun Outdoors in San Diego. This is kind of the base camp for Winnebago's testing program on this rig.
Yeah, and I did not mind returning to Sun Outdoors because it's a very nice resort.
It is really nice here. Way nicer than we're used to.
But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about our impressions of the eRV2. Now, what is it for those of you that don't know? First, it is an all-electric RV. There is no fuel of any kind on board.
None.
No propane, no gas, no diesel, no nada. It's all electric.
Yeah.
And it's just a prototype. And that prototype thing is kind of key.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's got a limited range, and we'll get to that. And that's why it's not for sale. But Winnebago is using this for their own reasons.
Yeah, they're trying to get out ahead of things. And if you want to know why, I mean, just ask yourself, when is the last time you saw a car commercial on TV for a non-electric vehicle?
Huh, yeah.
I can't remember what. It's coming, regardless of where you sit on electric vehicles and electric RVs in particular, it's going to happen.
And Winnebago knows it's going to happen. So they are at the front of this. They're testing and they're learning from this test camping program.
So it's early days. If you remember the very first cell phones that came out in the 80s, and they were like
the
big bag phones.
Yeah, with the sling.
And you thought anyone that had one was like a pompous jerk. This is the bag.
I had one.
This is the bag phone of electric RVs.
Well, and look how far phones have come.
Exactly.
So yeah, good analogy. I like it.
First, for those of you who haven't seen it, we'll give you a quick tour of the eRV2.
Yeah, we're going to start with the outside, and the first thing is we love the smaller space.
Yeah, it's built on a Transit. I think it's single rear wheel, 19.9 long, under 20 feet. It completely fits in a parking space. And I'm not talking about the van life thing where you have to back the ass end of the van over the curb. No, it just fits in the parking space.
Yeah, and it had exterior cameras that we really liked for the backup system.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
360-degree overhead picture for the backup cameras. That was awesome. There's not much RV stuff on the outside.
Right.
I'll just say that.
Right.
There is a little sewer hose storage by the gray tank drain on the back, so that sewer hose is right where you want it, so I kind of like that.
But there was very few cuts and holes in the rig. You know, there's no park cable, no exterior outlets, no water connections.
Yeah. And there is solar. I guess that's up on the roof, right? There's 500 watts of solar on the roof, and an option. Well, I guess it's not an option, but it's another 400 watts of panels that you can plug in. So for a total of 900 watts of solar. Other than that, it's a Transit on the outside.
All right, so going inside, well, the first thing you notice when you're heading inside is this little mobile office right here. And we really like that, especially you were working remotely.
Yeah, I actually had to work remotely during this week. And the little turnaround office behind the driver's seat worked much better than I actually anticipated it would. I was ready to be miserable, and I wasn't. Now, granted, at points I had like 3 monitors going and stuff, and then you kind of run out of space, right? But for a sane kind of job where you have like maybe 1 laptop or something, it was completely doable.
Yeah. And then over to the galley area, it's got a nice counter space working. There's no propane cooktop, obviously. It's an induction cooktop tucked away in this drawer, and you can just pull that out and cook right there.
Yeah, and actually, if you pull that out, it's kind of a countertop extension, that drawer itself.
Yeah, so that's nice, having that extra cooking space. Love the sink.
Yeah. Now, the bathroom, there's no sink in the bathroom, And so you think, well, there's another sink 3 feet away, right? So it's not that big of a deal. And most of the time, it's not, until you want to try to shave. And the mirror was in the bathroom.
Here we go.
And the mirror was in the bathroom, and then there's the galley.
It's fine.
And
there's a sink 6 inches away from the bathroom.
But there's no mirror at that, anyway.
But the toilet's a porta potty, so you can pull it right out. And that porta potty was bigger than our own cassette toilet. We were able to go longer with that.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with the capacity in that porta potty. I think it's a Thetford Curve, like 5.5 gallons or something. It was more than what we have in our RV.
So back to the bed area, the bed folds over, and you can either have the bed set up or you can have this dinette area here. And we're lazy, so
and we hate puzzle beds.
So we just kept the bed out the whole time, and we didn't bother having a dinette.
Yeah, we didn't use the dinette at all because we don't like the puzzle beds. but there is a dinette available. So if both of you had to sit up to work at laptops, we could have done 2 separate workstations. With one in the back. But we're, like she said, we're lazy, and we just didn't do that. Okay, so let's talk about driving it. Now, our own RV right now, our Winnebago Echo, is a Transit, and this is an e-Transit. And so overall, the ergonomics, the view out the
features,
cab,
similar.
very, very similar.
Yeah.
So, differences I noticed, well, it's an electric vehicle, so it's going to accelerate a little bit quicker.
I loved the acceleration. James was less enthused than me. He thought it was more similar to ours.
Except when that guy with the little cruddy car with the coffee can muffler.
You beat him.
I beat him off the line. I think he probably just hung his head after that because it would have been embarrassing.
But there is a noticeable difference in the acceleration with any electric vehicle, and I sure noticed it. And it was such a blast to drive.
And it's quiet. And especially in campgrounds, we couldn't get to a camera fast enough to take a video, but we were driving down a campground aisle, and there was someone walking to the shower or walking
right
her
in the
dog
middle
or something.
of the aisle,
and she didn't hear us, and so she walked. I didn't want to honk at her.
I know. What do you do?
She walked all the way to the end of the aisle because she just didn't hear the van coming up behind her. So it's pretty.
It reminded me when we were on our bikes, and sometimes when you're on a bicycle, you get behind somebody, they don't hear you on a trail, and you kind of pedal backwards so they can hear your chain. We didn't have a way to pedal backwards with the eRV.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing about the driving that's different here versus our regular Transit is like the regenerative braking or engine. It's like engine braking on steroids.
That's what
really
it feels like.
It leaves you feeling very much in control, like when you're descending something.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but it's much more holdy-backy feeling.
Holdy-backy?
I don't know.
It's hard to explain unless you've experienced it.
Very, very confident when going down a hill. That you're not, sometimes you're trying to engine brake going down a mountain pass, and your vehicle keeps speeding up, and then you have to keep hitting the brake, and then that knocks out cruise control, and then you've got to put cruise control back on. And so this wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, like the drive. So now let's talk about the things that make it really different and the electrical systems. And there is a lot going on here. And I actually had to make notes and figure out there's actually 6 different electrical systems going on in this RV. Okay, so we're going to start with the Transit, the chassis itself. Okay, the battery in the Transit, and I've got notes. It's 400 volt battery, 400 volt battery, 68 kilowatt hours. That's 68,000 watt hours. So that's 400 volt DC. Okay, then in the chassis, there is a 12 volt electrical system. So there is a DC to DC converter somehow that brings that down to 12 volt to run things like the dash lights.
Okay.
Just the cigarette lighter plugs, USB ports in the cab part, as well as they even provide, and this is weird, but jumper cable connections.
We had to pump up the tires, and we were able to use our little Viair compressor by using those little jumper cables
which is
an
odd thought. I pity the poor fool who hooks up jumper cables to the. What's going to happen? It worked for power out. Power in, probably not so much.
Right.
Now there is also in the chassis still a 120 volt electrical system. So there is an inverter there producing 120 volts.
Is that the Pro Power?
That's what Ford calls Pro Power.
Okay.
So you can use the battery in the chassis to generate 120 volts to run some loads. Now, I saw this in the eRV in 2 different places. One, there is an outlet kind of on the passenger seat, like right here where Steph would be sitting. There's an outlet, just a regular household outlet you could plug in. Then Winnebago makes use of that in their controls, and you can actually enable Pro Power there, and that will sort of take it's limited by Ford. It's limited to 2,400 watts, but it will draw power from that to go into the house systems in the back of the coach. Right. So that's 3. We got in the Transit, we've got 400 volt, 12 volt, and 120 volt AC.
Inverter.
Now, in the house, the Winnebago part behind there, there is a 48 volt DC battery. Technically it's 53 volts, but 48, we'll call it a 48 volt battery. That is a 15,000 watt hour battery. That's just a little bit smaller than the massive amount of batteries we've got in number one.
But it's still huge. 15,000 watt hours is a lot. You could run a coach indefinitely.
I don't think we've ever used 15,000 watt hours out of our battery bank.
It's a crazy amount of battery power.
So, and it's a 48 volt battery or 53 volt battery. Okay, so there's that.
Okay.
There's also a 12 volt system in the house. There's a DC to DC converter to bring it down for things like some of the USB outlets, the water pump, the lights, things like that. And then finally, there's an inverter in the house for 120 volt AC power. So again, that's going to run some 120 volt outlets in the house.
Right. The water heater.
The water heater and the heater, the comfort heater and the water heater, those are both 120 volt. Because remember, no fuel. We're not burning propane to heat the water or the air. And then there's some USB outlets, USB-C outlets in the coach. Those were, for the most part, powered by the 120 volt system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
those weren't 12 volt.
No, there was one or two in there that were 12 volt, and then the balance of them were actually run on the inverter.
Okay.
Now, the good news is with 15,000 watt hours of power, we didn't care too much about conserving power. Like if the inverter has a standby load of 50 watts, we don't really give a crap because there's so much power.
So we left the inverter on the whole time because we had so much power. It didn't matter.
Kind of immaterial what was getting its power from where, because everything had power all the time while we were in it. Okay, so that's all the different electrical systems on the eRV2. Now let's talk about charging it up, because there's no fuel, so that's how you're going to have to get it charging. You're going to have to charge them. Except for solar, I guess. But
yeah, true.
So now there are two charging ports on the eRV2.
Right. There's the front one for the chassis, and that's charging the chassis battery. And then there's one over on the driver's side, and that's charging the house battery.
Right. But they both use the same J1772 connector. So there's not like a traditional RV power cord that you're going to use with this. It's only this weird thing. And ours came with these two boxes from Ford. And the boxes have adapters for both 50 amp 240 volt or 20 amp 120 volt connections. So depending on what you have available at your pedestal, you can either plug into 20 amps or the 50 amp outlet or whatever, right?
Right.
Now, what does this mean for charging at the campground? Well, let's talk about charging the vehicle itself. So with the 20 amp plug, that's like level 1 charging on an EV. That's mind-numbingly slow. In fact, that box thing, it's limited to just 10 amps, so that's 1,200 watts to charge a 68,000 watt battery bank.
Painfully slow.
It's just slightly longer than drying your hands with one of those warm air hand dryers in a public restroom. So let's assume you don't want to do that. So the next step up from there is to use the 50 amp connection. And so when you plug in with 50 amps, it's actually, you plug into the 50 amp plug, but you're limited to 30 amps for charging. There's a safety margin built into that.
Okay.
So you're 30 amps for charging at 240 volts, that is 7,200 watts.
It's better.
So now you're getting in the ballpark of where you're talking like an overnight charge, or 11 hours kind of is what we're thinking for that.
Yeah.
So that's charging the vehicle battery. Now let's talk about charging the house battery bank, the 15,000 watt hour bank. Now, since we have the 50 amp 240 volt connection, you can plug that in and use that to charge the house batteries. And when we did that, it was really spinning the meter. And I was able to get 4,700 watts of charge acceptance from the house battery bank via that 50 amp connection and the Ford box.
Okay, that's fast.
That's 4,700 watts. Yeah, that's more than 30 amps at a, what we charge with.
Right.
Now, with the 20 amp connection, if you were to plug into that, it is limited to 1,200 watts. So that's going to be a bit slower even than like what we have with a 30 amp connection, but it's still charging, right?
Yeah.
And that battery bank is, a quarter of the size of the vehicle bank, so it's okay.
So we got a lot of questions about what does this mean for the campground? Is this going to place a strain on campground power?
And, maybe, but for comparison, think about a fifth wheel with 3 air conditioners in it, right? That's going to be pulling about...
There's a bunch around.
There are many.
That one has 4. That one has 4.
Oh, wow.
So, okay. Well, let's say you're 3. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Anyway. So imagine a fifth wheel with 3 air conditioners. That's pretty typical.
Okay.
So each one of those is pulling 1,500 watts. So that's like 4,500 watts just to keep the air conditioners going, right?
Okay.
Now, if you get 2 people in there running hair dryers, that's another, 3,000 watts, right? So then you're over 7,200 watts. You're taking more than what the chassis charging is going to take.
Right.
Now, okay, what you're going to say is that nobody runs a hair dryer for 11 hours.
Or air conditioners cycle on and off as well.
But I don't know how long people run hair dryers, but I'm guessing you don't need 11 hours to dry your hair. So, but just keep that in mind for peak load.
Yeah.
So, let's say that the grid, in the campground can handle it, okay? But if everybody is doing that, then what does that mean? There could be like an economic impact for the campground owner, right? They're suddenly using a lot more power. They're gassing up everybody's vehicle in addition to, paying for their recreational
There
use.
are certainly problems and issues that need to be worked out. I don't think campgrounds are totally ready for this to happen yet, but that's part of our testing. Winnebago is also taking information on how it works at campgrounds.
How does the charging experience work? Just remember, bag phone, right?
This is the bag phone. Yeah.
It's the bag phone. We're trying to find a cell tower, and the campgrounds are the cell towers, and we're the bag phone, right? Some of them are ready, some of them not so much, right? This place is ready, but not everyone is ready. Now, that's charging at campgrounds, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. But what we can talk about is charging at public charging stations, and we did this a few times, and our experience varied wildly. And much of this will not be news to people who already own electric vehicles. They're used to dealing with this, but it's kind of Wild West out there.
Very much Wild West. So chargers, they have different procedures for how you work one to the next. Some of them are working, some of them are not. You never know. Sometimes there's a line at a charger. You have to wait your turn.
Multiple apps required to do this.
Yes.
Our experience ranged from we pulled up to a charger, all of the things were full, finally somebody moved, we pulled in, I had to download 2 or 3 different apps, none of those worked to get it to work. Finally I had to phone a friend, we got into the vehicle and we're like making settings changes on the dash panel in the vehicle. We finally got it to work, and then it took an hour and a half to charge up the van.
It was very stressful, but this is new for us. We're not EV people. This is our first experience with it.
Yeah, that was one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
The other end of the spectrum, we went to a charging station, we plugged in, and it recognized the vehicle, and I hit start, and that was it, and it charged so fast that we didn't even have time to really enjoy our lunch.
Yeah, it's like, hurry and eat. We only had like 17 minutes on that charge. I was in Electrify America, and they are doing it right.
Yeah, so so take that for what it's worth, right? That experience will only get better. Imagine trying to find a gas station in 1904, and that's kind of like where we're at right now with that, right?
And the other thing is chargers are set up, at least here in California, the ones we've seen are in parking lots, usually strip malls, and luckily this is all the bigger we are, under 20 feet. If we were in anything larger, we wouldn't have been able to get close enough to the charger to even get a charge. So that's something that needs to be worked out too, is once there's all electric RVs, how are they going to fit at the charger?
That's a very good point. We're very thankful to have the shorty RV to fit in there, because even our Echo would not have made it into a number of those chargers.
We would have hung out in busy strip mall parking lots, and it would have been uncomfortable.
It would have been stressful. Yeah. So anyway, it's going to get better. We've had experiences from one or the other, but we got a glimpse of how good it could work. Yeah. And so let's shoot for that. Okay, and the next thing that we got a lot of questions on, and these kind of are all grouped together, but we've got a lot of questions on like, how long can you do this? How long can you run the air conditioner? How long does it take to charge at the charging station, at the campground? And unfortunately, the answer for all of those is math. Math!
Math.
No, math. Come on, math is the answer to everything.
Sure.
So it's math. Well, it's math and a giant metric butt ton of assumptions, because you have to make assumptions, otherwise you can't even provide an answer to that.
Like even for how long can you run your air conditioner, weather matters. Is it super hot or is it a mild day? That's one of those assumptions.
Yeah, and how long, what else are you running along with it, right? So for these, you kind of have to assume you're running only that one thing.
Right.
How much are you getting from solar? Because that could affect it. So you have to kind of assume 0, worst case, which on this trip for us actually would have been a pretty good assumption because it rained the entire time until we got back here. You have to assume, that the thing you're talking about runs nonstop.
True.
Like the air conditioner, they cycle, they run, they cycle off. But how long can you run the air conditioner when it's cycled off? Forever, right? So you have to make a lot of assumptions. But it really all just comes down to math. So for example, how long can you run the air conditioner on battery in this thing? Well, it's got a 15,000 watt hour battery pack.
Right.
And the air conditioner is super efficient.
It's awesome.
Takes only 700 watts when it's running. I've got air conditioner envy now.
We love it. That's like half of what ours takes.
Yeah. So if you divide 15,000 by 700, you get 21.4 hours of normalized runtime. And that's better than what we can do with more battery capacity in number one, because that air conditioner is so efficient. I've now got air conditioner envy, officially. I am
Me too.
Trying to think of ways to get that air conditioner.
But that 21 hours is assuming it's not cycling at all, and it never does that. So you're going to get a lot more than that. But
yeah. And now let's talk about the heater. The heater in this thing, it's a resistance heater, right? So it's kind of like a big hair dryer. Think of it that way. When it's running, it takes 1,500 watts. Well,
that's a lot.
So 15,000 watt hour battery divided by 1,500 watts, you're going to get about 10 hours. If the heater runs non-stop. Now, granted, I don't know how long anyone's going to run a hairdryer. You would cook yourself in there if that thing ran nonstop for 10 hours.
But this is a prototype. It's not for sale. So,
but anything more than that you want to figure out, it's just math. You've got a 15,000 watt hour battery bank. Divide it by the number of watts that the thing you want to run uses. That will give you an answer. Will it be the right answer? Maybe. I don't know. But practically, like from our experience, if we leave aside the things that use kind of a lot of power, like the air conditioner and the heater.
And the water heater.
And the water heater. Yeah. That's right, that one's electric too. Leave those aside.
Okay.
Then how long can you do anything in there? Pretty much indefinitely.
That's true. With 15,000 watt hours, you can have electricity for almost forever.
Yeah,
in mild weather, if you're not.
And for the smaller things, for things like the water pump, the lights, charging your laptop, you've got 500 watts of solar on the roof. If you get a few hours of sun a day, you can run pretty much indefinitely. Normal day-to-day usage is going to go out for a long, long time. Even the inverter, like I said, we left the inverter, just left it on the entire time, and we never felt like, oh gosh, we got to plug in, we're going to run down the house. But we never even got it below like 80%.
Yeah.
So how long can you run it? It just depends, but...
Math. That's how long you can run it. Do the math.
and the same math, by the way, works for charging it too. Like if you've got this many watts of charging, like the 1,200 watt charger, how long is it going to take 1,200 watts to charge a 68,000 watt hour battery? It's going to take like 96 hours or something. It's days. So
don't do that. Don't do it that way.
Don't do it that way. There's better ways to do it.
So starting to wrap all this up, it's been really interesting getting this glimpse into the future.
Yeah, whether you want them to or not, electric vehicles, and that includes RVs, they're coming. Yeah. I can't imagine 120 years from now, people will still be driving around in gasoline or diesel-powered RVs. It just doesn't seem likely.
Right. This is happening. And now, even though this one only has a range of 108 miles...
That's going to be a deal breaker right now for a lot of people.
But that's going to improve with time and technology. This is going to continue to get better and better, just like computers, how they grew better and better over time.
Yeah, the one thing that surprised me is when we got that one really good charge, because I was prepared for all thinking, I don't want to have to wait at a gas station for an hour and a half while the thing charges.
Yeah.
But when we got that second the charge that actually like
the 15-minute one.
Yeah, that was an eye. If all the charging could get to be like that, and we'll get there eventually, then this really opens up a lot of possibilities. Now, still, I'd want more than 108 miles of range, but if you want to leave feedback, ask questions, leave comments, there will be a link in the YouTube description at the bottom of this video. You can click over to our website, The Fit RV. There will be a post with some more details over there.
Yes, leave comments, ask questions at the bottom of that, and keep this conversation going because it's pretty exciting to think about.
Interesting.